shout outs to Daxton and Reggie for supporting this episode of the podcast. Let's roll it.
Hey guys, it's Jonah Crosby. I placed second place in 4x4 at US Nationals 2019. Thank you for listening to episode 87.
Hi, this is Daniel Goodman.
Dylan Wang from JPerm.
Ian Scheffler.
Shiva Mansur from India.
This is Alex from Z3 Cubing.
What's up, guys? This is Jaden McNeil from Australia, and you're listening to the Corner Cutter Podcast.
That's right. Welcome to the Corner Cutter Podcast. Podcasting since 2014 and cubing since 2015. I'm your host, Josh. And this podcast is dedicated to having in-depth interviews with cubers from all across the sport. Today's guest is Jonah Crosby. He placed second in Nationals 2019 for 4x4, and he is also sponsored by the Cubicle. We'll jump right into that interview in a second, but if you have any feedback for the show, I would love to hear from you. My email address is josh@thecornercutterpodcast.com, or you could just go to the website, thecornercutterpodcast.com/feedback, and fill out the contact form there. And now let's jump into my conversation with Jonah. Jonah, thanks for joining me today on the Corner Cutter Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us something interesting that has happened to you recently.
Recently, I'd say the most interesting thing to happen to me was probably getting second place in Nationals in Baltimore. It wasn't really anything that I was expecting, and I definitely wasn't I wasn't necessarily expecting to get Podium in general, but let alone second place. That's probably the most interesting thing to happen to me recently.
Nice. Congratulations. Thank you. And now, what would you say has been the biggest accomplishment in your cubing career?
Definitely the second place at Nationals. Just because of the fact that, yeah, I've been in the top 10 in the world for 4x4. I've gotten, back in 2017, I got a 2305 single that put me ninth in the world. Earlier this year, actually, I got a 2185 single that put me ninth in the world. But those, at local competitions, the atmosphere is so different, and I'm not nearly as stressed. I can actually perform much better than I normally would at home. But at national final, that's when your time, it's really your time to shine. It's a good representation of how fast you actually are. So I feel to me, that was just reassuring that I'm actually as good as I think I am.
Mm-hmm. What did your solves look like in the first couple of rounds?
The first couple of rounds of Nationals, they were not that great. I'm going to be honest. I think my first round average was a 28. I think second round was 29 or 30, something like that. And then semifinals, I really messed up. I want to say a 31 to 32. I was actually the 12th seed going into finals, so there were basically no eyes on me, and then I was kind of leapfrogged in front of anyone. So
nice. Well, I guess that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Besides that competition at Nationals, do you have a favorite or most memorable competition?
Definitely Worlds this past year. Just flying to Melbourne and going, just being in Australia is a completely different environment than anywhere in the US. Even before I went to Paris, before I went to Melbourne, just going to Portland, Oregon for Nationals in 2016, I thought that was a different atmosphere. But going across the world and experiencing that, it was a great time. It's something that I'm never going to forget. Did you have any
other fun experiences at this year's Worlds that you wanted to share?
Yeah, definitely the Nations Cup. Going into it, I was really good friends with Andy Denny. I didn't really know Luke Garrett that well. But I was looking for a team. Andy Denny texted me one day. He says, "Hey, are you looking for a Nations Cup team? We're looking for one more." I said, "Yeah, sure. Who are you with?" He's like, "Oh, Luke Garrett." I was like, "All right. I mean, he's fast. I don't really know him, but let's see how it goes." And the first round, I believe, was against UK. It was UK 1 or UK 2. I actually messed up super badly. I think I got a 10-5 or something like that. I almost lost us that first round. Then second round, we were up against France. We ended up beating them, another close call. And then it came to Australia one. And there was no doubt in my mind. I was like, we're gonna lose this. It could be the end of it. It's a good run, but whatever. Somehow Andy pulled a 6, Luke pulled a 6, and then I pulled, I believe, a low 8. And I remember I was the anchor, so I was the last person in my team. I finished my solve. I look over. Jay is still solving. Me and Luke make eye contact, and we just go wild. We were not expecting. I don't think anyone in the venue was expecting that, but that was probably the most memorable thing at Worlds.
Wow, nice. Who was on the Australia team? Felix, Jay, and
I believe it was Tommy Caprilis.
Okay, yep. Mm-hmm. Nice. That must have been very exciting.
Yeah, it was wild.
Is there a personal record or world record or national record that, well, I guess it would be national or continental record that you're like trying to get right now or really looking toward, or just something personal that you're trying to get?
My end goal would probably be get North American record for 4x4 single or average. I don't really have a preference. Obviously, that's going to be super hard to do just because Max Park is dominating the scene right now. Like even getting second place at nationals, I was still something like 3 or 4 seconds slower than he was. So,
okay, but it's something you think is within reach for you?
I'm not too sure. I'm gonna try my best. Let's see what happens.
Okay. What 4x4 are you using right now?
Right now, I'm using the Angstrom Valk 4M.
Okay.
Yeah.
What has your progression been over the last year or so since the new ones came out?
I wasn't actually improving that much, like for the entire year. It was just like very slow progression. Like I would see, I don't know, maybe like 0.05 of a second off of my average of 100 or like average of 50, something like that. It wasn't crazy. And then the day actually I got the Angstrom Valk 4M, I think I shaved something like 0.5 second off my average of 50, maybe like 1/3 of a second off my average of 100. It was just like a super rapid improvement out of nowhere. And since then, it's only gone down.
Nice. So hardware really helped right there.
Hardware was a big thing.
What were you using before the Valk 4?
Well, before the Angstrom, I was still using a Valk 4. I believe it was just the one that she sent me directly. I think I probably tensioned it, lubed it a little bit, but for the most part, it was just out of the box.
Oh, it wasn't the Mini though, right?
No.
Okay. What do you think about the Mini?
The Mini is not awful. Like I enjoyed it for a while. I actually used it, but I feel like the Valk just kind of fits like my turn style a little bit more.
Okay. So could you tell us the story of how you got introduced to the Rubik's Cube? What's like the first time you actually saw it and thought like, oh, I could probably do that, or there's no way I could do that?
I actually love telling this story. So I'm the youngest of 3 boys. I grew up in Massachusetts, as some of you guys may know. And me and my oldest brother, when we were younger, we had the biggest rivalry imaginable. Anything I did, he wanted to do better. Anything he did, I wanted to do better. So I started playing guitar when I was in like 2nd grade. About a year later, he started playing guitar. He started doing martial arts. Like a couple months later, I started doing martial arts. And there was one day I saw him playing with a Rubik's Cube. And so I said, all right, I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it faster. I learned to solve it. About a month and a half later, I was faster than him. And then I just kind of dove headfirst into like this whole world of Rubik's Cubing that I didn't know existed. And then I found out there were competitions. And I saw there was one at Brown University. So I'm about a half hour, 45 minutes away from there. So I went to my parents. I was like, hey, there's a competition nearby. Could I go to this? And they're like, yeah, sure. They didn't really think much of it. It was like my parents, my grandparents, and then one of my friends from school. Went, had a great time. I met so many people. I actually ended up meeting Phil Yu on my first competition. So still friends with him to this day. But it started out more as like a social thing. So I started like going to this competition, see people from New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, just friends that I normally wouldn't get to see, like if I was just staying at home in Massachusetts. And then as time went on, I started getting better and better, and here's where I am today.
Nice. When you actually what was the point you actually thought, oh, I'm pretty good at the Rubik's Cube. I think I could really get good at this.
I say the first time I thought like, oh, I'm actually have like a little bit of a name for myself was back in 2015, a competition at MIT. I out of nowhere, I don't know what happened. So just for a little bit of context, my at home PB average of 5 before this competition was a 9.15. I go to this competition, first round, second round, I think I end up getting like my first sub 10 average in comp. And then in finals, I somehow pulled an 8.56 average that won me the competition, put me, I believe, 10th in the US and 40th in the world. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, like I actually have a lot of potential. And then as time went on, like my ranking started to go down. I was like, all right, it's probably just a fluke. And then summer of 2016, at a competition in Lexington, Massachusetts, I got a 4x4 solve, a 2631 4x4 solve that put me 12th in the world. And that's when it really clicked for me. Like, oh wow, I'm actually like really good at this, and there's a lot of potential right here. It's not just like a little fluke. So from there, it's just practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to when you first started learning the cube, did you dive in with the beginner's method first? What resource did you learn how to solve it with?
I'm pretty sure I actually learned to solve it off of the Rubik's Cube website, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I did start out with the beginner's method, and then I ended up transitioning to CFOP just because it was a very like linear transition from beginners to CFOP. Like, rather than doing corners and then edges for the first two layers, you do corners and edges at the same time. So it was just an easy transition to get a little bit faster. And then as time went on, I learned more algorithms. I started just kind of intuitively figuring things out on my own and just kind of going from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're first getting introduced to CFOP, you're like, wow, I can solve all these pieces in just 4 steps. This is going to make me so much faster. But then,
I know. My mind is blown. It's like, wow, I can permute the corners and the edges at the same time. It's like, this is amazing.
Yeah. So cubing for you right now, what is it looking like? You went to Nats, Worlds. What else has been going on?
Right now, we actually just finished organizing the next competition at Stony Brook. So that'll be, I believe, November 23rd. The competition page is up. Registration is going to open November 20th. So I'm excited to start seeing people register, see what the competition is going to be like over there.
Nice. So that's in Rhode Island, right?
No, Stony Brook's on Long Island.
Long Island. Okay.
Yeah.
That's where I misheard you. Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when did you get started into organizing competitions?
That's a great question, actually. The first competition I ever organized was one in Sharon, Massachusetts, my hometown, actually. I wanted to organize it in like my high school gym or my high school cafeteria. The school was kind of giving us a lot of problems, so we said, all right, forget it. Let's try to find another venue nearby. And then we ended up checking out the community center in my town. And you go into the community center, you take a right. There's this it's a pretty decent sized room. I would talk to them. The price to rent out was pretty good. Like the space itself was pretty good. So I ended up going to, I believe Tim Reynolds was the first delegate I ever worked with. And he was like, yeah, sure. So we organized it. The first competition I ever ran went super well. I believe at some point we were like a half hour ahead of schedule, and we never ran behind. So from there, it was just organized. But it's been a lot of fun. I've organized competitions basically all over the country. Like I organized a competition in, I believe it was Houston with like Jonathan Collins, like Eric Zhao. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. What has been the hardest part besides you mentioned the venue?
Like figuring out what to organize.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like
honestly,
in the whole process from when you decide I want to organize the competition to when it's over.
Honestly, other than finding like a good venue, it's the scheduling, because you got to take into account like the region you're in, how many people are going to be there, like whether or not you want to make it like a strict cutoff, or like a lower cutoff. It's just kind of like you have to take into account a bunch of different factors. But Yeah, I mean, for the most part, that prom is a much lower tier than just finding the venue. I'd say that definitely the hardest part about organizing is finding that like perfect venue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any tips on good places or
Uh,
things to ask when you're calling places or checking them out?
uh, honestly, my biggest pet peeve at competitions is not having enough wall outlets or not having Wi-Fi. Because I'll go to competitions and my laptop doesn't have the best battery life. My phone doesn't have the best battery life, so I'm always kind of looking around trying to find those. Other than that, just making sure there are enough tables and chairs. Another big pet peeve of mine is like, let's give an example. Like, can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's just like if there aren't enough places for people to actually sit and practice, that can be a big problem.
Okay. That's definitely something to remember. Is there anything special that you like to do at your competitions, or I think something that you have that you usually don't see at others?
Not necessarily. I'd say the one thing that I like to do at my competitions more than you'll see it like others is I love to have head-to-head finals. Just because I really see cubing as like as a really good spectator sport. I love like watching streams of big competitions and giving head-to-head finals. It kind of gives that feeling, but in person, obviously. So I love to do head-to-head finals at my competitions. I feel like it just makes the atmosphere so much like more intense, and it makes it so much more enjoyable to watch. Because I like to invite a lot of my friends that aren't into speed cubing to competitions, just kind of have them see what's up. And head-to-head finals is like a great way to show them like, hey, this is actually like a really good like spectator sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Definitely keeps everybody engaged too during that final round where not very many people are actually competing. What do you see happening with cubing in the next few years?
In the next few years, I hope to see it obviously grow. I hope to see a lot more like third party companies coming in and like doing sponsorships and really promoting us, similar to kind of like how Red Bull came in is promoting the sport right now. In reality, I'd say in the next few years, I definitely see it growing. I'd say cubing right now is comparable to, let's say, like competitive gaming probably like 10 years ago. I think I was talking to, it was like James LaChance and like Justin Malaria Nationals. And I remember one of them was saying that like esports probably like 10, 15 years ago, going to a major competition was something like a prize pool of like $25,000. And you look at cubing right now, Nationals this past year had a similar prize pool, somewhere around $24,000, if I'm not mistaken. So my hopes is to see cubing kind of turn into what esports is now. Like as time goes on, we see bigger prize pools, bigger companies come in, and just more like outside engagement into the actual like sport.
For companies sponsoring cubers, besides puzzle shops and puzzle manufacturers, what companies would be relevant at the same time, even though it's not like specifically cubing?
I say probably stuff in the area of like Red Bull, Monster, just kind of like energy drinks, maybe sports drinks. Like I'd love, if possible, to see like a Gatorade sponsorship. I think that would be fantastic. More than that, the only thing I could really think of is maybe like a clothing sponsorship. So like big name clothing manufacturers kind of partnering with either cube stores or cube manufacturers to kind of make like quality jackets and really like promote this as kind of make like their own like premium lines of clothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Maybe even shoes too, because definitely a good pair of shoes on competition day is a must.
Or honestly, something that I would love to see is like speed cubing gloves for those like super cold competitions, so you never really have to worry about warming up. Or like I'm talking about like gloves that you can actually solve efficiency with.
Ooh, yeah.
That would definitely be something cool to see in the future, but it's far-fetched. I'm hoping it will come through.
What event could use improved hardware the most right now?
I'd say probably 6x6 and 7x7. I know that that's kind of like a lame answer. You hear it a lot, but I do think there is a lot of room to improve in those two events. We've seen 5x5 hardware improve a lot, especially with the release of the Valk 5. That cube is unbelievably good. The problem with 6 and 7 right now is simply just like the actual mechanism that it uses. I'm gonna kind of pick on 6x6 specifically right now, just because obviously it is an even layered puzzle, and like the mechanism is super different. You have to worry about like internal pieces popping out, and it just creates like a whole problem. My hope is that we can see more puzzles similar to like the Spark coming out, not the Spark, Shadow, where it's like it's super stable, but you can also like you don't really have to worry about. I'm trying to think of how to put this. Where it's like you can turn as fast as you want, and you don't really have to worry about like internal pieces popping out or like internal pieces like misaligning, that kind of stuff. So if we can see more stuff like that come out, then I think we'll be all set.
Have you really played with any non-WCA puzzles that you really enjoy?
More recently, not really. For the most part, I just kind of stick to like end by end puzzles. But when I was first starting out, I was big into like the mirror blocks puzzles. I had like a small collection of those. I think I had something like 3 or 4. And that was like a lot of fun to play with, just because like trying to recognize patterns, say like a Z-perm on something where everything's the same color, but the blocks are different shapes. It was always just kind of cool to me, like how those things would work.
Yeah, me too. It's like trying to figure out the OLL algorithms and then recognizing when like 2 blocks were sticking out and all that kind of stuff. What's your overall favorite cube?
My overall favorite, definitely 4x4. Mostly just because it's something that I feel like I'm super comfortable with, and I feel like I kind of know a lot of what there actually is to know about 4x4.
Mm-hmm. What method are you using?
Yeah.
Now, could you share the story of how you got sponsored by the Cubicle?
Yeah, so it was actually a long time coming. I had been trying to join the team for like a little while, and eventually, like at nationals, I went up to them. I was just like, "Hey, like what's going on? I just want to know like if this is still like a possibility. Like what's going on with this?" And I was talking to them, and they were like, "Here's the thing: is that you're a 4x4 specialist, and it's not that we don't want you on the team, but like we already have enough of those. It's like you're like we understand that you're really good, but having you on the team would kind of be redundant because there are already so much like people in that kind of area. But they're like, we'll tell you this: if you podium a 4x4, we'll give you a white jacket." And that stressed me out a lot because I think before this past year at nationals, I don't think I'd ever placed higher than like 6th or 7th at a national competition. I was like the 5th seed going into the competition. I was the 12th seed going into finals, and I just kind of went to finals with the mindset like fake it till you make it. If everything goes wrong, if I bomb my first 2 solves, just act like everything's fine and just hope that you can redeem yourself. And luckily, everything went well. My slowest solve was like a low 29, and then the remaining it was like 26.9, 26.3, and then like 2 mid to high 24s, and I ended up getting a 26.07 average. And I ended up going up to them. I was like, well, I made podium. They're like, welcome to the team. So,
Wow, I can imagine how stressful that must have been. Woo.
Oh yeah. Luckily, I'm just glad that I wasn't like a higher seed up, because then I would have at least had like some eyes on me. But the fact that I was 12th, it was like Justin Malari and like Brandon Delacruz that were like cheering me on in the crowd, and then everyone else was doing their own thing. So I was super grateful for the fact that I was a low seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's a fun story.
Yeah.
What goals do you have for your education and future career?
So right now at Stony Brook, I'm studying mechanical engineering, and in the end, I want to go into aerospace with that. So mechanical engineering for like like if you don't know or if anyone else doesn't know, it's like design engineering. So it's a lot of math, a lot of physics, and it's basically just trying to make sure that whatever I'm designing actually does what it's supposed to, and it's not going to break or have any like defects like while it's doing its job. So the reason I want to go into aerospace, so that would be say like designing rockets, stuff to go on maybe like the ISS, just like basically anything that has to do with like weather and space. The reason I want to go into that field is because ever since I was young, just the concept of space has always fascinated me. The idea that the universe is so big and there's so much that we don't know about it, it just kind of always piqued my interest. So when I decided like what major I kind of wanted to go into, and I ended up choosing mechanical engineering, I just knew that was like the field I wanted to specialize in.
Nice. Yeah. So you're really interested in astronomy as well.
Yeah, for the most part. I wouldn't say necessarily it's like astronomy. It's, how would I describe it? I don't know. I feel like astronomy is more like the specialization. It's like the study of like actual planets and stars, whereas aerospace is more just like a general kind of like space area.
So by doing the aerospace, you're kind of still into space and planet and I guess astronomy and that, but you're doing engineering instead of actually science, right?
Well, I mean, engineering is like its own field in science, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, science more like I guess it's a different kind of science.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that is really cool. Good luck with all of that.
Thank you.
What do you see happening with cubing in your life over the next couple of years while you finish up your education and all of that?
My hopes with cubing is that I don't ever see cubing as something that I'm going to stop completely. I may just kind of like fade into the background and more be like a passive cuber, like go to a couple competitions here and there. But I don't see it ever being completely removed from my life, just because I've made so many friends and like there's just so many like great opportunities. I have so much history with cubing that I don't think it's something I could ever completely just let go of. In a perfect world, my hopes would be to improve my rankings, potentially get some records in the next 3 years. I'm going to try my best to do that, but just like being in college and a cuber at the same time, it's kind of hard to balance those. So my passive goal right now is just stay an active cuber, keep my ranks as they are, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Okay. Did you have any other stories that you wanted to share that you thought of?
Yeah, there's this ongoing rivalry between me and Chris Olsen. I think it started back in 2017 or 2016. I went to a competition in like the Midwest, somewhere around there, and he was there. And like I met him, we started talking, and I think he beat me in finals by something like super, super close. It was probably like, I think like maybe 500ths of a second or like 10 or like 0.1 seconds. And then every competition from then on, it was who's going to beat who. So we would race during like just like warming up for rounds in between rounds. And I would always beat him in practice. And the competition comes and he would always beat me just ever so slightly. And I don't know what the count is right now, but it's kind of frustrating on my part because I think I beat him like once and he's beat me like 8 or 9 times. But every single time in practice when we're racing, I always beat him. So that's kind of like a little funny story between me and him.
Okay, well, starting to wrap up, what is something you've changed your mind about recently?
Does it have to be necessarily cubing or
No.
really anything? Anything?
Take it whatever way you want.
I guess something that I've really changed my mind about recently is the idea, I don't remember where I read about this, but the idea that you can put in 20% of the effort, you get 80% of the benefits. And that's something that I've started to implement more at school to kind of help balance different things. Because when I first came to college, I was grades. I would sit in my room, I would study all day, and then I would practice cubing whenever I had like free time. But more recently, I'd say probably in the last like 6 or 7 months, I've learned that I was reading up upon like you put in 20% of the effort, you get 8% of the benefit. So I've started putting in like less effort in school, and I've noticed that my grades for the most part haven't been changing. In fact, more recently they've gone up. So I guess like my advice to most people is you can really find a good balance of putting in work and a little bit of work everywhere and getting a lot of benefit out of it. So you don't necessarily have to focus on one thing to be super good at that. Like you can find a good balance and still be successful. So that's kind of how I've been able to balance like cubing, school, and just like social life in general.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Jonah. Where can people connect and find you on the internet?
Yep. So I have a YouTube channel. It's just my name, Jonah Crosby. I have 2 Instagrams. I have my personal Instagram, which is just at Jonah Crosby. I have my cubing Instagram, which is at jc.cubing. And then past that, I don't really have any more social media, but that's where people can find me.
Okay, I'll link to everything in the show notes to this episode on thecornercutterpodcast.com. Jonah, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
That was fun, and we got into some interesting discussion topics and stories as well. So I'm glad Jonah was able to come on the podcast. So now, if you're a regular TCCP listener, you might be wondering, why hasn't there been an episode since September 13th? And it's mainly because school. Right now, I'm not able to devote the time needed to create a weekly podcast episode. But I'm guaranteeing there will be a new episode of the Corner Cutter podcast on the 1st of every month. So November 1st, there will be a new episode. And then anytime in the month where I have the time, whether it's break, like it was last week, or a light school week, I will try to get out another episode. So you'll be getting 1, maybe 2, hopefully 2 episodes per month right now, just in this season of my life, because it's super busy with homework. And the free time that I do have, I can't devote completely to the podcast. So November 1st, definitely will be an episode, I guarantee that. And I appreciate all your support for the podcast, even though there aren't weekly episodes. If you're a TCCP patron, make sure to check out the bonus audio that you'll be getting. It includes how we got the audio quality that we did for this episode, a bonus story, and then some really good bloopers, quite a few of them this time. So make sure to check that out. For as little as $1 a month, you can support the show on Patreon. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and come back November 1st for episode 88 of the Corner Cutter Podcast. The New England Patriots have been doing pretty good this year, I have to say. So I'm pretty happy about that. Go Pats.